hear often that every security engineer needs to be a coder as well. Maybe 3 years ago that was true, but the world has changed thanks to vibe coding.
How about we start with your journey, Kerry?
I never intended to be a CISO. I started out as a network engineer. I never wanted to be a feature developer. I really love doing all the things that developers don't like to do.
There's one thing about running security as a program, but then the other thing is how do you do it in an organized manner? And the term that I've heard the most is running security as a business function.
That's the truth. I remember once when I was younger in my career, like an HR consultant came and spoke to us and he asked a question, how many of you in this room are business people? And no one raised their hand. And then how many of you are engineers? And we all raised our hand. And he said, you're wrong. You're all business people.
What are the difficulties in running security like a business function for a CISO?
We work in a discipline where the cost of failure is extremely high. It has good qualities because it makes us conscientious and thorough. Sometimes that's not the speed at which business wants to move.
For security, there's just so many things that you have to look at. Is that also like a really big difference as to how the life of a CISO is so complicated than a life of like maybe a CRO?
Let's maybe take the example of a CFO. The CFO has a lot of jobs and there's a lot of moving pieces, but at the end of the day, they have the tool they need.
Do you think AI is at the stage of helping with some of these deterministic and non-deterministic things? Welcome back to 10 Minutes with CISOs. I'm your host, Prasen. My guest today is Terry O'Daniel. He's led security at companies like Salesforce, Netflix, Instacart, and Amplitude. Someone who I admire for his knowledge around the intersection between business and security. And today, we're just going to explore that. We'll understand what does it even mean to run security like a business function, a topic that I've heard recently come up quite a lot. I know managing security as a mature business function means one thing, but running it like a business function is another. So let's explore what does it even mean. I know it's a huge and a broad concept, but with every question, we'll dive deeper and try to understand better. Let's jump in. So the more and more I'm talking to CISOs, right, I'm realizing that the practice of running security and the role of a CISO, both of them are getting matured with time. There's one thing about running security as a program, but then the other thing is how do you do it in an organized manner? And the term that I've heard the most is running security as a business function.
I mean, that's the truth. We are business leaders. I remember once when I was younger in my career, I was in a room of engineers and an HR consultant came and spoke to us and he asked a question, how many of you in this room are business people? And no one raised their hand. And then how many of you are engineers? And we all raised our hand. And he said, you're wrong. You're all business people. You're all working for the business. And I think you hit on the heart of the transformation in security over the past few years. Security used to be a technical discipline. It used to very much focus on being reactive. The things we talk about are MTTD, MTTR. It is a very reactive mindset. How quickly can you fight the fire once the alarm goes off? And that's still part of the job, but I think the transformational element has been the acknowledgement that this is a business march. We can't secure everything. It's just impossible. And then we have to make intelligent choices driven by the business that we're in. If you work for a bank, that's one thing. If you work for a small, scrappy 50-person startup, that's a different business. If you sell to enterprise customers, that's one thing. If you're selling to other startups, if you're selling to end users, it's all different. So absolutely, I think you need a core technical understanding of how it all fits together, how the software factory works. But the transition has become, how do we get a seat at the table with our peers? And as a security leader, my peers are business leaders now. So if I'm not being strategic, if I'm not talking about risks in dollars, then I'm missing the mark.
I know it's a really broad area and a huge topic that we have picked, but I think with every question, I would love to dive deeper and understand what does it really mean to run security as a business function, okay? So how about we start with your background, with your journey, Kerry?
Well, I never intended to be a CISO. I started out as a network engineer, and I had the good fortune to move to San Francisco at the tail end of the dot-com boom, and I worked for a series of incredibly small starters that were solving some of the first web and internet challenges out there. For me, I never wanted to be a feature developer. I really love doing all the things that developers don't like to do. Infrastructure is code now, platform engineering, service engineering, what evolved into DevOps. That's really my technical background. So for me, it has become an evolution over time. I remember at one point when I was a director of production engineering at Yahoo, and I realized that we were doing amazing technical work and the business didn't care. They cared about the outcomes. They cared about how to balance risk versus resources, how to balance speed versus quality, things like that. And it wasn't enough to just be the smartest engineer, the 10x engineer. It was about how do you absorb the needs of the business? How do you identify the crown jewels? How do you trace those back through attack paths and kill chains? But most importantly, risk. Risk is at the core. It's a resource allocation problem. We don't have enough resources to secure everything. It's not in the best interest of the business to lock everything down. I can secure any system. I just unplug it from the internet. That's not helpful to the business. It's about understanding where to give, where to hold the line and say, no, this is really important. And to be an advocate for the value system of the people working in the burden.
When you say it in that fashion, right, it kind of sounds pretty simple, right? That we gotta like just understand the risk and the priorities and kind of like go and implement it. Tell me what makes this complex. Like, what are the difficulties in running security like a business function for a CISO?
The number of security people in your organization will never be a one-to-one map for your developers, let alone your total employees. So we are a small function and we sit at the hub of the wheels. We're often balancing concerns from legal about regulatory compliance, concerns from engineering about developer productivity. How do we pull all that together and come up with a unified view of what's our list of priorities? I frequently get asked the question by a board or a leader, what keeps you up? And that is a good signal to take in from the business and sometimes just hold up a mirror and say, a lot of things keep me up at night, but how about you? What can we not get wrong? There's a lot of things I want to get right. I want to build a great application security program, infrastructure security program. The business doesn't care. They want to make sure that we're able to make our product. And because I've worked in software my whole life, the product is code that we ship to production. How do we make this product? How do we make it? How do we get the features that our customers are demanding to ship faster? That's a lot to balance together. And I think it speaks to another element. We don't have it easy in security because we don't have the fallback of saying, oh, I'm a front-end developer. I don't really understand the back end or vice versa.
Right.
In security, you just have to understand everything from physical security to infrastructure as code to operations of incident management. So when it comes back to risk, that's why I say it's always a resource decision. How do you make the sense of the world and come back with a list of, here are the top 5 things I'm going to work on today, this week, this quarter, this year?
Do you think there is this lack of a particular framework that helps CISOs or security understand what does it even mean to run security in a business function?
Well, I think it comes down to 2 major elements. One is we work in a discipline where the cost of failure is extremely high. And that it has good qualities because it makes us conscientious and thorough, and we want to do our research and really understand the problem space. Sometimes that's not the speed at which business wants to move. So one thing I do as a security leader is I try to find the spaces where we can innovate, we can experiment and fail, we can build a sandbox so people can play. And then, and it's not only for security itself, but in terms of how we talk to our engineering partners. Where can you innovate? Where can you try and fail? Where am I going to wipe out that environment every night so I don't really care how badly you mess it up? And then the further right we get, like, the more the stakes raise, the more we have to lock things down. It creates a challenge because no developer wants to work in a stodgy, boring environment. They want to do interesting, fun stuff. So I think it's about finding a balance and being transparent about where can we try and fail? Where does that cost of failure get too high compared to the risk appetite of that business? I've worked for companies that have a very high risk appetite. They want to go fast. They want to prioritize speed over quality. My job is to bring a perspective to the table that says, what if? I understand that your developers, are good, conscientious people and they wouldn't by design hurt the company. But what if they mistype something? May send something to the wrong environment. What if they pull in live customer data rather than sanitized data? I love a phrase I learned at Netflix: context, not control. Engineering does not report to me. I cannot tell them what to do, but I can give them the context to make good and eyes open, risk aware decisions. So it comes out less to a compliance framework and it comes back more to how can I be empathetic with my developers? How can I pull in the risks and the concerns of the business, but filter them through a layer of that empathy? And ultimately, I'm trying to just help people understand the paved path versus the rocky road. I'm not saying you can't build your own off-end system. I'm saying it comes at a cost.
Got it. What is the difference, like the fundamental difference between the role of a sales leader or a finance leader to a security leader? And what are the challenges that we have in security that somebody in that vertical wouldn't?
One of the key differences is no one understands what we do. And we tend to measure our own value along two different axes. One is maturity. I want to understand how mature our software development lifecycle is, how mature our CI/CD practices are, things like that. And that is a fairly linear progression. I can measure where we are today, where the business wants us to be, and I can come back with an opinion about, if you want to get from a level 1 to a level 3, here's what it takes. And I can write that roadmap. But unlike some other areas, security has to be incredibly interrupt tolerant. As much as I say, security is moving from a reactive to a proactive discipline and becoming more strategic, when the rubber hits the road and there's an incident, all bets are off. And no one wants to hear about my maturity model. I need to understand my capacity. How much elasticity do I have in my team? If I have a small team of security engineers and one of them is sick, how do I have the coverage of the skill set to support everything in our tech stack in terms of what our customers are going to ask, things like that? So I think the challenge is for security because it's still an emerging discipline. There were no CISOs when I started. It's really a new role.
Right.
And we're 10-ish, 15 years behind, for example, the CIO. And in their structured relationship they have with their internal customers, how their performance is rated, things like that. A CISO can do amazing work supported by an amazing technical security team, and then you get a data breach and you're fired. So in a way, it's not fair, but we also have more freedom because of that. We have to be more proactive in telling leadership, in telling the board, in telling our peers in engineering and legal what good looks like, what good enough looks like, and how to grow the program over time. And some of that comes down to the fact that security leaders need to be not only very good program managers, which sometimes we don't have the training in, but we also need to be incredible relationship managers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one piece of advice I give people when I'm mentoring is I know you want to do fun stuff on the keyboard, but as you move up the ranks in security, your time hands on keyboard goes down and your time influencing, evangelizing, and arguing sometimes goes way up. So start practicing now.
For security, there's just so many things that you have to look into.
Yeah.
Right? Like risk assessment, strategy, quality, compliance, vendor reviews, DLP, incident response. I can name like 50 to 60 products that you guys use, right, on a regular basis in a security stack. Is that also like a really big difference as to how the life of a CISO is so complicated than a life of like maybe a CRO or CIO or like a sales leader?
Yeah, let's maybe take the example of a CFO, right? The CFO has a lot of jobs and there's a lot of moving pieces, but at the end of the day, they have the tool they need. Everyone has an ERM these days. So there's a challenge in security where, don't get me wrong, I love the fact that we're in this renaissance of security tools, which, I've gone from being a builder and having to build everything myself that I wanted. I love the fact that we're using the term GRC engineering now. It speaks to really trying to get to the meat of what is the purpose of this tool. But it's a little frustrating when I remember 3 years ago, there's this frequent question in CISO circles. Do you want best in breed or do you want the best platform? And I honestly don't care. Some of it comes down to the business we're in. If we're a cloud first business, then yeah, I want the best in breed CSPM because that's the most likely attack vector. I do need a high level of assurance for myself, let alone for our partners, customers, auditors that we're doing all we can. But when you ask me, do I want a platform? Sure, but that doesn't mean a SIEM that does other things too. A CSPM that also has a little sprinkling of DLP. What I really need is an ERM. I need a single view, not into all my technical elements of security, but as a business leader, what is the job? How do I track the fact that I have a presentation to the board coming up? How do I balance that with the risks that are changing over time? Not just because of the nature of our business changes, but because there's a zero day. There's another log4j or an XZ utils dependency pump. So I think the big lack, I think it's amazing that we have so many good technical tools now, and a lot of them do up level and give me a single pane of glass to look over my tech stack and my environment. But I still don't really have a tool for me to be a business leader and to effectively manage how I run this business function on an ongoing basis.
Do you think AI is at the stage or like Gen AI, agentic and agents are at the stage of helping with some of this deterministic and non-deterministic things?
I've been here through a couple of different tech revolutions, through the advent of virtual machines, containerization, orchestration systems like Kubernetes, the birth of DevOps, the move to the cloud. And without being absurdly reductionist, I think a lot of it comes back to first principles and fundamentals. I don't know a year ago, I didn't anticipate the rise of agentic AI to the level it is today. And I certainly can't anticipate what's going to happen next year because the rate of change is just increasing. So what we can do in security is focus on the fundamentals, focus on the intersection between systems and humans, because an AI, agentic AI, what have you, can never be accounting. Those are still humans' decisions that are being made with tools. Yeah. Whether the tool is a robot that can think and talk to you or not, ultimately, the current model of our business is come down to which human is accountable for this decision and how can they be supported. On the flip side, I am an optimist, and I do think that we are in a very interesting Wild West period where, and I think about back to Kubernetes,
Yeah.
when we were trying to catch up with the development cycle of Kubernetes. And the second I figured out how to harden one version, the next version was out. So it's challenging,
Yeah.
but security has to focus on guardrails,
Right.
not gates. The more we try to cling to those old patterns of, well, you've got to go through a design review before you can release this. Well, you need to make sure you ask security if you can install that. The world is changing too fast for us to take that reactive gating approach. I think we have to build the best patterns we can that adapt and evolve as things change.
Do you have any final advice for people who are in the same boat, or anything that you would like to share around this concept?
Well, I think to start on a note of empathy, this is a very tough job. And it's one of the reasons I love the security community is that it's a place where we can close the doors and, you know, grouse a little bit about the challenges of the job. So it's important to find your people, to find your peers, to be transparent with your peers, find those working groups that use Chatham House rules where you can share those learnings without breaching the trust you have with your employers. Because there's if you feel overwhelmed, you're not alone. If you feel lost and scared, I'm sure there's someone out there who feels just the same way you do. Don't take it upon yourself to try to boil the ocean. Be gentle with yourself. Realize that you're not the problem. The problem is that security as a discipline is still catching up, that we still lack some of the tools, but also just the frameworks and the systems to make sense of our world, to evaluate our own performance, let alone find a way for others to evaluate our performance. So if there's one thing I would encourage people to focus on is not just the latest technology, but find ways to build the operational systems and practices that help you do your job. Having the best tool to help you with incident response is, of course, valuable, but having an incident response process that you drill and drill until the muscle memory is in you, and when you get that page at 4 a.m., you can just fall back on that muscle memory and succeed at your job. Sometimes those are the less exciting parts of security, but you're paying yourself, right? You're investing in yourself, and you're going to take those skills with you wherever you go.
For people who are trying to enter security vertical and who are new to this, what would they do this week, or one actionable thing to learn more about the business of security that will actually encourage them to come here?
I hear often that every security engineer needs to be a coder as well. And, maybe 3 years ago, that was true. If you can't at least scrap together a Python script, you probably don't have a place in an engineering first company security team. But the world has changed thanks to vibe coding. And at the rate of change we're at, what's the world going to look like in 6 months or 1 year? I certainly don't know. But I do know that ultimately you're building partnerships. You're trying to build trust. Trust is won by drops and lost by gallons. And I think the more you invest in understanding how software is built, no matter the tools or mechanisms or data structures that are in vogue today, you're going to work with other humans to some extent, understanding their value system, understanding how to be of use to them so that they seek you out. All of us want to shift left, but sometimes it's less about building the best hardened base image or having a library of blessed NPM packages. And it's more about understanding, how are your peers doing business? How do you set up shop so that you explain to them the value you provide? And help them out. The more you can lean in and help developers be successful at their job, the more they will seek you out as a trusted advocate who can sometimes say the things that they're unable to say. Often my job is to go to engineering leaders and say, you're not giving your developers enough time to fix the vulnerabilities. And I don't want to be the pressure point. I need you, because again, context, not control. These people work for you. I need to advocate for them on their behalf to make sure that systematically we can do the best job possible. So it's not fun and it's not the latest tech, but focusing on relationships, focusing on how do you manage programs? How do you communicate the expectations and results? Those are things that you will always find a place to use these skills.